Hello and welcome to the classroom stage. My name is James Muller and I am the director of a national tour group and a former educator. Our goal here is to provide you, the savvy educator, with different tools to enliven your instruction. This time around, we focus on games in the classroom. Game-based instruction and gamification practices give you two powerful tools to engage your student cast members in learning and journeying toward mastery. Your script in this case is the Google Drive link available in the description of this video on the YouTube channel. Make sure you access that for all of the educational theoretical references we've provided, and you can substantiate all the work that you're already doing through those wonderful resources listed at the end of the script. When we talk about games in the classroom, we're talking about two major characters here: game-based instruction and gamification techniques. Game-based instruction is simply using games to teach. Now look, my first stint in the classroom was way before Common Core, before Danielson's FFT, even before the internet. But I knew early on that using games was a great way to engage my kids in my Spanish and English classes. As a matter of fact, let's go back in time and see some of the techniques I was able to use back in the day. Well, maybe not that far back. That's better. I figured out early on that if I could use game-based instruction in the classroom, the kids would be more eager to participate. And we did this in a number of ways. In the time before the purveyance of digital games that you all have access to now, I created games for my Spanish and English classrooms. We did whiteboard races where the kids would take a white dry erase board, write their answers, hold it up above their heads. It was a great way to engage them and create some enthusiasm. You could also use flashcards written with specific vocabulary in Spanish for the kids to run around the room and label the different elements of the classroom. It was a great way to engage the kids, and they loved it. They wanted to keep playing. So, in essence, game-based instruction is using games to teach vocabulary or your specific lesson. Gamification, on the other hand, is turning something that's not a game into a game, adding game elements to something that would normally be a traditional instructional exercise. The teaching of culture in the Spanish classroom is crucial, of course, but there wasn't a lot of time to get to it. So what I did is I had a box in the back of the room with very short culture worksheets that addressed different aspects of Spanish culture. In their free time, the kids knew they could go back, and it was a great area with a rug and a beanbag chair, and they could fill out those worksheets. Once they were corrected by me, the sheets would be counted towards the kids' progress, and they would get to put a star on a wall chart. Now that seems pretty elementary, I know, but they loved it. And I could do the same thing in my English classes with independent worksheets on Elizabethan culture or the Shakespeare era, or even different differentiations of the cast members in Romeo and Juliet, which was a required element in freshman English in Central Illinois back in the day. This time around, though, the kids would turn it into a game by taking a colored rock and putting it in a jar with their name on it. It was just a different way to keep track of their progress. And again, the ability to do that enlivened the exercise for them a little bit. So whether you choose game-based instruction or gamification practices to augment your lessons, games should be fun, energetic, and relaxing and non-threatening to the students. You're going to spark their motivation toward competence and allow them the opportunity to want to play the game. And that's the entire point. Former U.S. Secretary of Education Terrell H. Bell once remarked, "There are three things that are critical when thinking about education. The first is motivation. The second is motivation. And the third is motivation." Your consideration of putting game-based instruction and gamification practices into your classroom is going to do one major thing for your students. It's going to alleviate frustration. Now that you know where you're headed, you've got to decide how to get there. And this is where your EdPsych 101 theories come in. Y'all remember Piaget and Vygotsky? Well, it's an important opportunity for you to review those concepts and decide whether your kids are a little bit more open-ended and collaborative, a la Vygotsky, or a little bit more developmentally rigid, like Piaget. They're learning those things along the lines of when they should. The truth here is, though, and you know this full well, they're probably a combination of both. I think the big takeaway from the Vygotsky-Piaget discussion is for you to decide your learning style. Someone with my personality and my outward flow of collaborative work with the kids, I'm going to frustrate someone who is a little bit more logical. Meet Ray. Ray came to me as a college graduate with a degree in musical theater, and when he arrived on our campus, he told me that he had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at a very young age. He's been navigating that his whole life. Well, that came into play in the rehearsal room as my instructional approach with all the analogies and all the esoteric definitions and acting out and the pressure and the time frame really frustrated him. But we learned from each other and adapted. How did that all work out, Ray?
Well, it all worked out because you were very personal with me. You would take me aside and you would explain certain things to me that helped me actually a lot. I'm very slow, and I apologize for that when it comes to learning certain things. Yeah. And in college and high school, they went really, really quick, and I don't pick up things really quickly. I'm very meticulous. So, like I said, I wish they kind of did that back in the day, but... You know.
And that's what you need to know about your specific students. Now, if we do an exercise in the rehearsal room and we're going over ballet terms or jazz terms, I'll slip Ray all the words that we've been talking about so he can look at them real quick on his phone or text them to them ahead of time so that there's not that pressure, so that there's not that idea of being out front and having the opportunity to fail in front of everyone. And that's a really big deal for any kid or any adult, no matter what the subject matter or stage. If you want success in your classrooms, knowing their learning proclivities is crucial. And the best way to ascertain those is to have the kids take a learning styles quiz. It's very easy to find online. Some of them are only 20 questions. As a matter of fact, I had our actors take the quiz, and we came up with 3 specific different learning styles, which was great for this project. But you need to know if your kids learn in a visual way or more auditory. Maybe they're more verbal, physical, logical, social, or independent. The fact is that you've probably got all of those in your classroom at all the same time. You can't adapt your instruction to hit every single one every single time, but if you're aware that the majority of your kids learn in a more visual way, then select a game that's more visual. And on those days when it's appropriate, do more physical activities. Every single day we had a pep rally in school. The kids were so wired up, getting them to sit there and try to do something was absolutely fruitless. So we did vocabulary scavenger hunts. We did vocabulary relay races, anything to engage them in a physical way. Yes, some kids would prefer to stay back, but there are ways to overcome that too. Check out the companion video as we present to you some of the games that we came up with to engage all different learning styles. When you're thinking about motivation, it's also important to consider spam. Not that spam, this spam. Social interaction is an important component of your students' enjoyment of the activity. They're going to want to show their work to each other. They're going to want to collaborate. Hey, I get to play a game with my friends is a really big motivator for participating in the activity. Then there's purpose. This generation doesn't tolerate a lot of foolishness, and they'll catch on pretty quick if there's no clear reason for the game. They're going to want to know, why are we doing this? If you give them that objective, that learning goal, they're more likely to participate as well. Autonomy deals with the idea that they can do it on their own. They want their work to be their own. It's a representation of their identity, after all. Depending on the game, it can be something that's very representational of who they are. So that's an important part of motivating them. They get to do it on their own. And of course, mastery deals with the idea of doing it well and succeeding. The I win factor is a huge motivator for people, even here. Now it's time to audition your games, to select those games that will best fit your student cast members. As you audition, there are a number of things to consider. Number one, what is the skill being taught? What is the Common Core CCSS standard? What are you trying to validate with the use of the game? Number two, what are your students' learning styles? Now, again, we said you can't hit all of them at the same time, but you can hit the majority of them and engage most of them in a game that will create an atmosphere of safety and motivation. Number three, what are your own personal goals? Is the game supposed to be fun? Is it supposed to be a little bit more rigid? Is it assessment or new knowledge or review? What do you want to get out of the game? Number four, what specific terms do the kids need to use before they start the game? Have they played it before? I remember being frustrated, even in college, when professors would try to implement some sort of exercise and we had no idea of the terms. I even had a girl in my cast one year, and I was using very basic theatrical terms like downstage, upstage, stage right, stage left, and she had never learned those in her high school drama classes. Here was someone who was a great singer, great actress, had all kinds of commercial potential, but had never been given those terms, and I was frustrating her. So I learned very early that at the beginning of the year, we all reviewed those. Number five, what are the specific directions of the game? No kid likes to be left out on the island not knowing what to do. So make sure you have told them how to play the game and how they can win. Very, very important. And finally, number six, select your game, pre-plan it, chart it, try it out, and then most importantly, assess. Did it work? Would you play it again? Were the kids engaged? Games you pick fall into three classifications. The first is classroom-based games. Now, these are the kind of games that you create out of everyday things in the classroom. Again, remember, when I first started in the classroom, there was no Kahoot, there was no Nearpod, there were no digital games to access. We had to use the materials that we had. And it turned out really, really well. We did the whiteboard races that I talked about earlier. We also did a lot of fun games with Simón dice, in Spanish, Simon says. And the kids really enjoyed that. I also took advantage of a game I made up called This or That, taking concepts or vocabulary words that were pretty similar but needed a distinction. Now, all of these games that I created and a couple more are available on the companion video to this one, The Classroom Stage, Games in the Classroom, Performance. Make sure you take a look at that and see what those of us back in the day did. Digital games are simply games with screens. Now, your kids probably love their phone more than anything else on this planet. I use that to great advantage by allowing them to use those phones to take screenshots of billboards or newspapers that have bad writing, misspellings, grammar mistakes. I've even allowed them to take screenshots of online journalism writing that is substandard, that has a lot of those kinds of mistakes in it. Trust me, if you're going to engage in that activity for your kids, just make sure they have enough storage on their phone. Just a pet peeve of mine. In the advent of the computer age in the 90s, we started to get great programming and games like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, The Magic School Bus, Nancy Drew PC games, all of these things that engage the kids in critical thinking. My own kids came up with online computer games given to them by the school like Study Island or cool math games. And my son, to this day, as a sophomore in high school, every time we drive to school, plays brain games on his phone as we're driving in. So it's great to engage them with those digital games. Now you, as educators or soon-to-be educators in this modern era, have access to a litany of resources online of digital games that can enhance your classrooms. Kahoot, Nearpod, Quizlet. And if you don't find something you like specifically, you can even create your own. There's a great one called Goose Chase, where you make QR codes and go on digital scavenger hunts. I started investigating all of these as I am new to the digital arena. But here's the issue. It's a fantastic blessing to have all of these options available for my classroom. It is also a complete, overwhelming pain to have all of these options available to my classroom. There is no way I could go through and filter out those games that would be most appropriate for my kids. So what's an educator to do? What you need to do is talk to your colleagues, find out what's working for them. Maybe there are specific games that are unique to your school district. Some school districts allow phone use, some don't. As you investigate the digital resources and the potential of digital games in your classroom, I think it's best to start with those that you know, those folks in your circle of education who will give you kind of a direct way to whittle down all of the options to a more manageable list for you to audition. Published games were my jam back in the day in my first stint in the classroom. Now remember, this was all before the internet and the digital games you have today. I would take games like Monopoly or Clue for critical thinking. We would find a number of other games that were educationally oriented, but even using something like Uno to reaffirm the numbers and colors in Spanish was a great idea. My favorite thing to do, though, was to take the game shows of the era and adapt them for the classroom. When I first told the kids that the $100,000 pyramid used to be called the $10,000 pyramid, they thought I was old as dirt. But they got a good laugh out of it, and they loved that game. You get 7 words to give to a partner, and it's a great way to reinforce vocabulary banks. We also played a lot of Family Feud in the classroom. They loved this. They got on their teams. Sometimes I'd let them pick, but sometimes I would choose to make sure that those kids who would shy away from that activity took place and had a good time doing it. And of course, everybody loved a great game of Jeopardy. And when we played that, knock it off.
Oh.
And don't forget the impact of pop culture on your students. Folks like Jimmy Fallon and Ellen DeGeneres often feature great games on their shows, and the kids can readily access those. So here's your chance to remind yourselves of the 3 classifications of classroom games using a Jimmy Fallon game called Word Sneak, sneaking a vocabulary word into everyday conversation.
Hey, Christian, what are you doing?
Well, Haley, I'm actually labeling everything in the classroom. It's one of my classroom-based games.
Christian, what are you doing?
Haley, I'm playing one of my digital games. Don't bug me.
Christian, what are you guys doing?
Haley, we're playing a published game, Uno.
As the reviews come in, you have a grand opportunity for assessment. Did the game work? Was it fun? Were the educational goals met? One of the best ways to discern if you would play the game again is to ask your students. Their responses are going to be very candid, and you're going to get reviews that will help you to, again, figure out if you're going to use the game again or move on to something a little different. You can ask them questions like this. Bailey, did you enjoy, or what was the best thing about the Family Feud game we did?
Well, it was actually really fun playing a game that's been done on TV before.
Yeah, so you've seen it before and that made it more interesting to you?
Yes, very.
Oh, good. Ray, was there anything particularly frustrating or difficult about the whiteboard races we do?
Well, I felt a little rushed and pressured. Honestly, I don't like being last at anything, so it kind of made me feel a little anxious.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. And with that note, if you'll watch the whiteboard races in the companion video, what I did as a teacher is I differentiated by slipping Ray very slyly a word bank. So instead of having to come up with the words off the top of his head, he had a list from which to pick the appropriate word, and then the pressure was lessened a little bit. Did that help when we did it that way?
Oh, it helped very much, absolutely.
Good, and then he gets to participate, but not feel like he's going to be the last one or the one left out. The important thing about reviews is to learn in the assessment, to learn in the critique. You will find out ways to adapt the game so as to encourage a more balanced game in the future. And trust me, your remolding of the game on the student's behalf will register with them, and they will be more inclined to participate in the next game that you design for instruction. Your classroom is a stage focusing all the attention on you. You are the director of your particular subject area, and your kids are looking to your authority your interest in them, and your management of the classroom with regards to security and safety to gauge how much they want to participate, their motivation. Create a sense of joy, encouragement, and life in your classroom by using game-based instruction. On behalf of a fellow educator, and more importantly, a parent, thank you for everything that you're doing to equip fully the young people under your charge. We look forward to your continuing success and wish you the very best.